Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. And if you saw the title and you saw the thumbnail, I may have infuriated you, depending on which side of the political spectrum that you may or may not belong to. Now, if you watch this program, I constantly preach that it is not about left or right, it is about right and wrong. And we're rolling with that, baby. That's how I feel. A lot of you guys understand I'm not MAGA. I'm not a huge Trump supporter, especially with his failures on Julian Assange and other core issues. But I'm not a Marxist either and never have been. And I think that you need to open up the conversation to as many people as humanly possible and try to bring them together against a predator class. And so yesterday, while I was scrolling through my Twitter feed and some social media, I saw certain people talking about a MAGA and Marxist connection of coming together. I had no idea who had first promoted it or why it was trending all of a sudden. And my good friend, Craig Pasta Jardula, happened to DM me on the subject. And I was still a little bit in the dark of where all of this had come from. So instead of speculating, I said, hey, Pasta, do you want to come on tomorrow and let's talk about where this originated, where it's going, the backlash that has happened for even considering that both sides have a common enemy, and that enemy would be the predator class, in my opinion. So without further ado, let's go to the man, the myth, the legend, the guy behind the Convo couch, AM Wake Up, and so much more, Craig Pasta Jardula. Craig, how are you today?
It's awesome, Jay. Thanks so much for having me on, man. It's always a pleasure to come on Jason Bermas show.
So break it down for me because, you felt the need to DM me, kind of get me involved in the conversation. And, again, I got to plead ignorance. I don't know who started this. I don't know why it was trending. I have no idea what your opinion is on the matter. So take me through where this became kind of a social media trend out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd like to start off by saying that I'm not throwing shade in any way whatsoever to the person who started the conversation. In fact, he's a friend. I thought I was going to pick up the phone and call him and talk to him about it. His name is Jackson Hinkle. Uh, but Jackson Hinkle has been wrong about a few things here and there, right? And I really never approached him about similar things. Like, he once did a story citing Naomi Klein's article about the Great Reset being the conspiracy smoothie. Uh, yeah, I know. He took a lot of flack from that. Like a lot of people who were once followed him or were, kind of on the fence with him, or just lost their mind when he did that article.
And
Like,
by the
how
way,
can you do that?
as well he should have, but it does seem like he's come around to the idea of the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, and that brand of globalism as he brought it up, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago on the Tucker Carlson show, correct?
He did. And I think that's why a lot of people, too, were upset as well, because the fact that he once did a story about the conspiracy smoothie, that he shouldn't be the best one to go on and represent talking about the Great Reset, kind of tying the lie to Soros, which a lot of people thought was a kind of buzzworthy by mentioning his name to a Fox crowd, that he shouldn't have been the one to necessarily be repping the Great Reset. But that didn't bother me in any way, shape, or form. If he has a message that's on point and it gets out there, so be it. Um, some people do find it a little comical, but at the end of the day, whatever. But this last tweet that he had made that was we're bringing Marxism and MAGA together, and the elites and the global elites of that is whatnot, the deep state, they're crapping their pants because of this. But it could be nothing further from the truth. I do a lot of election integrity events. I just spoke at one that was held by the American Project, Patrick Byrne. He put on the event, so you can imagine there's a decent amount of MAGA there. I've talked at a lot of events like this before. I've been out in the streets. I talked at Defeat the Mandates in LA. A lot of MAGA people there as well. The one thing that MAGA fears more than anything and can't stand, even more than China, is is Marxism, is communism. You'll say it. I mean, at this event I went to, which was one whole day, and a nice long day. It went from like 9 in the morning to 5 in the evening. I probably heard Marxism get bashed, a form of Marxism, whether it be socialism, the main one being communism, getting bashed about 12 times at least, from speakers out there. And the very next day, I sat down with some friends, some people who were at the event, some people who attended the event. Same thing. Marxism and socialism and communism all together in one, being the same theory, is the number one thing that MAGA fears. And I always say, well, this is a distraction to say this stuff, because really, to tell you the truth, if you try to kind of push this false narrative that there is a bond between Marxists and MAGAs, and by the way, most of the Marxists, the people I know in the United States who consider themselves a Marxist, I made this comment that 50% of them don't even know what they're talking about. And same with 50% of the people who are screaming at Marxism. The most people who are screaming at Marxism from the MAGA side are screaming at this form of cultural Marxism. It's not this, economic Marxism, which we witness down in the global South, where it's a collective effort from the group of a state like Nicaraguans to push back against the empire. Totally different than what we see in the United States, where it's more about, identity politics and cultural wars and whatnot. So I think there's a misunderstanding from the MAGA people what Marxism is, and I think Marxists over here, don't even understand what Marxism is, but they don't like each other at all. You know what I'm saying? And to say that there's going to be a bond, and we're trying to bring together a group to unite around ideologies, is just going to lead to a weaponization to further divide us, rather than what you were kind of alluding to in the beginning, is coalesce around ideas, issues, pushing back against the predator class. That's how you build a bond together, not this way of, Marxisms and MAGA coming together, because it's completely false.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I don't have a intricate understanding of Karl Marx and Marxism and Marx and Engels. I used to have, well, he's still my very, very good friend. We just spent some time together in April. That literally, he went from being kind of a socialist / Marxist and proclaiming that type of an ideology to now almost a pseudo neocon, which is, it kind of blows your mind. I mean, there's a good 15 years in between that phase. But generally, when I think of Marxism, I think of a collectivist ideology. But unfortunately, the way it's presented, it doesn't let you in on the little secret that there is still a hierarchy. And at the very top, you have authoritarianism. Am I getting that correctly?
Listen, I don't know if necessarily Marx really was advocating for big government, but it's what's become of a form of Marxism. I mean, when you talk about communism, socialism, you have strong entities at the top having a lot of control, and that's the biggest issue which the MAGA people find when it comes to Marxism. So, I mean, cultural Marxism came way after, when it was more about, the cultural wars and whatnot. I don't even think it was really called cultural Marxism. I think that was a plot by the CIA or the deep state, whatnot, to kind of merge those two together to really demonize, Marxism. But I mean, that's the problem. At the end of the day, it's a big government on top. It's like when you talk about socialized medicine. I used to be a Medicare for all person, hands down. I believe that Medicare or Medicaid healthcare is a human right, whatever you want to call it nowadays. But I thought it was mostly information, that why should we withhold that from the people and stuff? But when what we just witnessed a couple of years ago, that you don't want necessarily anybody telling you what type of healthcare you need to have. You want to have choices. Capitalism, where a lot of Marxists feel that capital, will always dominate in the capitalist society, where a lot of capitalism will always turn to crony capitalism, which is a form of fascism. Because then the state and the corporations are working together. You know what I'm saying? And that's exactly what fascism is what a lot of Marxists hate about capitalism. But MAGA looks at capitalism as freedom, as choice. You know what I'm saying? So when you talk about MAGA and you talk about Marxism, you're talking about two diametrically opposed ideologies that just will not come together whatsoever.
No, I would have to agree with that, and I understand that you're speaking at these events. And myself, I've been speaking at the Reawaken America tour. Patrick Byrne, obviously a big part of that. If anybody would like to see my interview with Patrick Byrne, it is exclusively available on the Rockfin, ROKFIN.com. Pasta, you're also a big part of the Rockfin, and I would encourage people to check that out because, at the end of the day, he was talking about blockchain technology, and I'm skeptical about using blockchain technology inside of our elections. I'm much more of a one person, one vote, hand ballot, hand counted, using technology to empower us to check up on that. And then he said, well, you know what? That's not a bad idea. In some of these countries, they literally take these votes and they put them in a bag in the middle of the room that everybody can see. And that bag is constantly monitored. And then they count them afterwards. Where are you at right now on the spectrum of election integrity and what tools we can use to perhaps get rid of fractional voting and voting machines run by billionaire corporations, whether or not they be Diebold or Dominion? What are your thoughts?
Well, being very careful, right? Believe it or not, I also have an interview with Patrick Burns that I released not too long ago on Rockfin. It's exclusively on Rockfin. I caught him at Defeat the Mandates in DC, but I didn't release the video until about 4 months later because I wanted to kind of go along with election time because we talk more about elections. This last event over the weekend, I was on the solutions panel with Patrick Burns, and your boy over here killed it, man, because this is his wheelhouse. And yeah, what you're talking about is something I mentioned all the time. Being an international election observer, getting to go to observe elections in 3 countries right now. My team has done 4. I personally went to 3, that being Nicaragua, Honduras, and Colombia. And I listed the 6 principles of free and fair elections, and I actually had literature which I was able to hand out to the people who attended. One of the 6 principles, number 5, is where it's cast, it's counted. And that happens in all those countries you see. It happened in Colombia, where you have tables inside a certain a polling center. And at the end of the day, when they close the doors and stuff, nobody can come in. People are allowed to witness it. No new people can come in, new voters, that is. The voters are cut off, but people can come in and witness it. And they, right in front of you, do all these counting. Right in front of you with hand paper ballots. And that's the way it should be done, where it's cast, it's counted. But you also alluded to something else too as well, Jay, because I'm with you on this point. I believe you do have to bring in power to double check people, right? Or technology, or what do you want to say? In an open source system, no more proprietary software, because I don't believe machines cheat. I believe people manipulating machines cheat. So therefore, if it's the human element is there counting the ballots, even though it's in public, in front of everybody, and it seems like you can't mess it up, you then have a machine double check and count the people's count right there in that precinct, and you have a system that is transparent and as secure as possible.
Well,
and
I would say
that is what we need to get back to. Yeah,
people are the ones that program the software that these machines use. And if we are going to use machines that run on software, number one, they should have absolutely zero, let me say this, zero capability to hook into the internet or even a network that would not be connected to the World Wide Web. That's number one. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the source code needs to be available to everybody. And then number three, if there is a large discrepancy between the hand-counted votes and the machine votes, we need some kind of an arbitration system in between right there on the spot that is going to try to bring us together. Because at the end of the day, I do think that the vast majority of people, no matter what political spectrum they're on, do want their voice to be heard and do want these elections to be fair. Most people don't go into it with this mentality of, well, the other guy's Hitler and we got to do it by any means necessary. I call it the Sam Harris effect, right? I don't care if there's dead kids in the basement. He's that bad or she's that bad. What are your thoughts on that arbitration system that you would probably have to have after bringing in some kind of a mechanism via a machine?
Well, a couple points I want to hit over there right now, but yeah, you're absolutely right when you say the majority of people wouldn't go, hey, man, he's a Hitler. It's just a small amount of people who do say that and get away with it. You know what I'm saying? Because they do find their minions and people who will go along who think the ends justify the means. I mean, they think that if they are stopping Hitler, you know what I'm saying, we're mitigating damage over here by taking Joe Biden because we have to stop the impending fascism that could be Donald Trump, and they go ahead and they go along with it, then, you know, case closed. They're going to pull it off. Even though the majority of people don't feel that way, it still can be, you know, thrusted into play, and we can have to suffer with the consequences of a small group trying to make decisions for everybody else because they think they're doing stuff that's in a what's the word, virtuous way. You know, I mean, you read the Time magazine article, they pretty much admitted what they were doing it, and they just framed it as we were saving democracy.
They were fortifying the election, sir. And they went to the edge of the law, but never crossed that line. We should totally trust Time magazine and the people that openly admitted that they conspired. Let me repeat that they conspired together, but within the means of the law. See, conspiracy theory only exists when authoritative sources say it's for our benefit in order to fortify the election against Donnie T, love him or hate him.
Yeah. I mean, totally. They pretty much admitted their guilt too. And it's kind of funny too, because even though they were saying that they fortified stuff, if you're an election integrity person, or if you just know the basics about elections, really, if you take a one-day course, you would be calling bullshit on that article as it was going along, because they were plain and simply showing they were conspiring together to manipulate governments, to manipulate small governments to change laws that they didn't have the right to change in the first place. You know what I'm saying? So right there, they exposed themselves. But yet, once again, and I was just on with Garland Nixon and Wilmer, Dr. Wilmer over there, and we were talking about it. You don't have to tell truths, right? You can throw those maybes out there and those insinuations, and they'll stick. And it worked in this situation when it came to the Time Life magazine cabal.
Let me just jump in, because you talked about changing laws, and I think it's really important for people to understand that they didn't really, quote unquote, change laws. What they did is they went through executive orders that were then challenged because they were not brought into the arena the way they were supposed to. Probably the most glaring example of that would be in Pennsylvania, and it's a subject nobody seems to want to talk about, that you had the state Supreme Court rule that all, not some, all of the mail-in ballots were completely and totally unconstitutional and should not have counted. Doesn't matter whether they were for Trump or Biden. And there's this new magic term called appeal. Now, number one, if a state constitutional body is going to look at that evidence and say that, it should have been expedited. It actually should have been done probably within the first week of the election, so there could have been challenges. It didn't come until I believe about 3 or 4 months ago, but then it was invalidated with this new term, appeal. And it's not just Pennsylvania. I believe Arizona has also ruled similarly on these mail-in ballots. I expect other states to eventually do so because, again, they were not passed via the law. They were not done in that system. I would also go to, for instance, the mandates in New York, the mask mandates that, again, were found by a Long Island Supreme Court justice to be completely and totally unconstitutional. And yet, Kelly Hochul and the gang, before she was going, wow, I can't believe we shut down the schools, wow, appeal. And then they immediately had letters going out to families in every single school district that we don't care about the state constitution. We don't care about the system in which we're supposed to bring in these laws. Speak to that.
Oh, man, there's so much to unpack there. By the way, if you don't like it here in New York, you're not a New Yorker. You don't stand for our values. Get on a bus, Jason, and go down to Florida where you belong. Or Mrs. Holtrell over there. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there right now. And I'm glad you're up to date on the Pennsylvania situation, the Mastorino. Doug Mastorino, I believe, who won his primary for Republican governor to be the governor out there. It has a good shot. He can win. He'll change the whole election game there. But you're right. You know, the state Supreme Court of Pennsylvania deemed the fact that they were not able and they should not have been able to shotgun out ballots to everybody who was on the voter rolls, that you had to go back to the old traditional way. They did this in Wisconsin, too, as well. You have to recommend the ballot, right? So that made I don't want to say that stuff. We're on YouTube. So, but yeah, they changed. I don't say they changed these laws, but they manipulated the rules under the context of the fact that it's a global pandemic and they have to make these rules to keep everybody safe. So they implemented all these things like, well, let's send everybody a mail-in ballot because they can't go out. Let's get drop boxes out in the middle of nowhere because they can't go into a polling place. You got to be safe, Jay. You got to be safe. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're up to date on this stuff and watching this stuff. And it is just crazy because, you know, I mean, they use this whole situation of this global pandemic to manipulate the whole situation. But I want to really importantly go back to those three things that you talked about when it came to the machines, because this is something that's in play right now. Number one, you talked about there should not be any internet connection whatsoever. Well, that's already law. That's supposed to be a law that these machines are not supposed to be hooked up to the internet in any way and not even have the capability to do that. But guess what? We found out in state after state, place after place, polling area after polling area, that they were hooked up to the machine. And who knows who were running them from wherever. And they can manipulate a vote from anywhere that way. And you have Democrats complaining about this for years when it, you know, when they were on the other side of the victory speech over there, when they were the losing team, they were complaining about it left and right. But now all of a sudden it doesn't make a difference. So that is already supposed to be a law. Number two, you point out about the fact that it's open source with the source code. We had a situation in LA where they were kind of marketing it and putting it out there that we're going to have the first open source system. The only problem is, Jay, when we asked for the code, they never gave the code. They never gave the code to anybody in the public. But yet they said they were just open source, but they were holding on to the code themselves. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not open source. The definition of open source means it's open to everybody out there. So therefore they can watch, look, check, make sure that everything legit is going on. If you want to plug some blockchain into that, so you can do that as a system as well. But then the third part is the arbitration part. And you're right. We have to come up with some system. And I would like to go to Columbia, New York, who does that, where they have a hand count all the way, and then they check it with the machines. I'd like to look at places that have done stuff like this before and see what it is. If it's within 1%, 1.2%, whatever like that, we go with it. If it's outside of that percentage for the machines checking the hand count, then we have to come up with a system. But the whole thing is we can come up with a system that does work, which we can understand, you know what I'm saying? And maybe if it's over 2%, the error, then we do a recount again of that, whatnot, and we see what works. Or we switch the people up in the team. We bring a different team in who counted a different set, like a different table of votes. They come in to count those votes. We can create rules and systems that put in place where it would be much more transparent, much better for the people, and we can find a way to make it work. So, you know,
No,
this
I
could be done.
absolutely agree. And I want to remind people that prior to the 2020 elections, there was a lot of buzz about the Baker-Carter report, where they were talking about how dangerous mail-in ballots were. However, what people were not talking about was Jimmy Carter basically said these machines are dangerous. I can't believe we don't have a system to actually audit these machines, and we should at least, at bare minimum, have a 1 to 3% audit. And honestly, I think that's very, very low. I think that we should have a 10 to 30% audit minimum, random audit, and who knows how they would make it random, because you know how these algorithms run and anything digital can be predicted, where these machines are checked up on. And really, this is an issue that goes beyond 2020, 2016, and goes all the way back to the 2004 presidential election, when these machines became more and more prevalent, and people like Bev Harris came out with black box voting and revealed this fractional voting system that I don't think people quite grasp. Talk about the fractional voting system, these machines, and how they aren't audited.
Wow, you see the smile on my face? You're just talking my language, man. At this event, Tim Canova was asked by American Project to bring some people into the fold, because they realized that, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of the patriots and the people who are kind of talking about elections, they are playing catch up. There's some of us who've been doing this for a long time, and at one point, it was like a hard line progressive issue. It was like a lot of progressives pushing for election integrity. So Benny Smith was actually brought in because Tim had recommended Benny Smith to come into play. People like Clint Curtis, people like Phil Evans. I can talk about all these people who were there with us. Tim Canova and myself, traditional leftists of sorts, now talking in this group right now. Well, Benny is now running black box voting, whatnot. Bev Harris handed it over to Benny. Benny was Bev Harris's programmer who wrote code. who, once they got a hold of this mechanism, a machine with the software, was able to go in there and discover that this wasn't a bug that was going on. It was an actual weighted feature. And a lot of these weighted features would be used in like condo associations when they have votes, and they would dull out the vote depending on the size of the condo the person had owned. So therefore, they would use this fractional mechanism in which they could do the votes. It's called a weighted vote. And it's a feature, not a bug, once again. And Benny Smith was able to explain that. So when people were out there this last time talking about hammer and scorecard, he goes, yeah, well, we actually have a name it's called fractional magic. He coined the term along with Bev Harris years ago. And that's what it's all about. And Phil Evans, who was the godfather of pattern analysis, it was so awesome. And I get to say, hey, Patrick, did you ever meet Phil Evans? In Patrick Byrne's movie, he shows this big chart with these big jumps, right? These mathematical anomalies, what I like to call mathematical impossibilities, which is used as a weighted mechanism. You're either clustering where you're stuffing ballots, or you have a fractional feature in there that's going to have a weighted vote. And the more votes come in, the more the pattern moves away from each other. So we were able to see Phil Evans in work on the same panel as Benny, right? Talking about fractional magic and pattern analysis, and it would shed so much light onto the system. And when people look at this stuff, if you go look at these two people, if you go look at Benny Smith, you look at Phil Evans in their work, you'll see what's going on. And this is what's going on. These are how our elections are being run. And I just want to say one thing about this whole thing before I hand it right back over to you, is that, JB, if we just put systems into play, right? All this malarkey that we're seeing where people are running around, running after their tail, trying to check the elections the way they are, part of the solutions panel, which we talked about, which I was on that panel with Patrick Byrne, if we would just implement these rules of free and fair, transparent elections, which we see in the global south, we wouldn't have to run around like crazy to check all this stuff, to figure all this stuff. This science wouldn't be necessary because it would be a transparent, free election right in front of us. It's not Dominion that's evil. It's not ENS that's evil, right? It's whoever's running these systems that they hand it over to. It's the term proprietary software in which people have to pay attention to. So when you say open source, you're actually presenting a solution to the problem that we wouldn't even have to worry about if we would just implement all these things we're talking about here today.
So I want to bring it full circle back around to MAGA and Marxism, because we've already talked about how most of the political ideology is simply diametrically opposed and on the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, I would argue that those that follow both ideologies really do believe that they are challenging the power structure and those at the top. Is there anything else in these two ideologies that you're seeing, Trumpism, MAGA, socialism, communism, Marxism, etc., that they do have in common other than that viewpoint that they are challenging the power structure?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think modern day socialism or communists out there right now are challenging or looking at the power structure. A lot of those people I know who call themselves a Marxist of sorts still think that globalism is just capitalism hidden. You know what I'm saying? They don't understand that's the problem with the left in America. They don't understand power. You know what I'm saying? The right understands it more, but there are a lot of things that do bring them together, and I kind of always explain that I don't think that a lot of people out there who claim to be a communist are just full-blown communists and want to, implement communism. I think the reason why they've kind of matriculated towards communism or socialism is because they believe in labor rights. You know what I'm saying? And they want to see, they don't want to see people being taken advantage of, and they want to see people with a good wage. Housing is a human right, all those things. It might not be a right, for the conservatives out there or the patriots, but I think at the end of the day, they want to see a better, decent standard of living across the board, and that's both sides. So there are, once again, the movement has to be made around labor. It has to be made around issues. And I think at the end of the day, if the left continues to educate themselves more, understand that these bankers are the ones who are controlling things, that they're people that they see in front of them in Congress really aren't the ones who are making the decisions. They're just the ones who are enforcing the decisions, and they can get on that same page where a lot of patriots are. And if the patriots can stop blaming China for everything, you know what I'm saying, and maybe go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole and look at the Rothschilds and the bankers, then maybe we can come together together and fight back and beat back a predator class. But there's still a lot of work to be done, but it has to be done on that field. If they try to do it on the field of ideology, at the end of the day, that leftist kind of Marxist ideology just praises and bows down too much to central power. They want bigger government, where the patriots want the opposite. They equate capitalism to choices. You know what I'm saying? They equate the patriots equate socialism to taking away their choices. So therefore, they'll never get together on that, but they can get together on labor right there.
Well, I would say this, I don't know that we've ever had, especially in this country and in my lifetime, a pure form of capitalism in the way that it is presented to many of these people. At the very least, you have crony capitalism. And as you discussed with the medical system, hey, I want everybody to be taken care of. I do think that that is a human right, especially when you look at how much many of these drugs cost to manufacture and then what you are charged for them, right? That does have to be regulated. But if you were to put in a system like Medicare for all, we've seen, as you said, over the last 2 years, you're going to be limited to the actual drugs that are not only safe and effective, but also cheap. You've been shielded from that. And instead, what gets pushed in these type of systems, capitalistic or socialistic, seem to be things that are driven by large corporations that have government contracts and are run by literal billionaires. And I think that somewhere, again, both sides could come together if they understood more.
Yeah. They have to understand the private-public relationship, right? The ownership of sorts. Like, nothing's really public anymore. It's all owned by private companies and all these bigwigs out there and all these oligarchs. Yeah, I mean, we have to just come together as humans, as Americans, and just put this stuff aside. Ideology, most of the ideology that we're talking about, right, has been written how long ago? Way before a technocratic age. The security state is not what it was back when this stuff was written. Now everything's different. When you put too much control, concentrated control into too little of hands, you now have a crazy transhumanistic spying security state there. And that's something I think that the conservatives realize a lot more than the people on the left. However, the thing about it is that I hear this conversation you alluded to. We've never seen capitalism. We've only seen kind of crony capitalism. Well, a lot of socialists will say, well, we've never seen a socialistic state, a true socialistic state. There's very few of them out there. You got Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua who are dealing with these sanctions and everything else and working around them. But other than that, everything's maybe a democratic socialism kind of situation, what we see in Europe and stuff. But when it comes to capitalism, when does capitalism never, ever turn into crony capitalism? And when does crony capitalism never, ever lead to fascism? Because capital will rule, and eventually big corporations like big tech, big pharma, the military industrial complex, they'll buy all up of government that they can buy, use their lobbyists to craziness. And now they essentially are the government. So I've never seen a situation, and I know, a lot of capitalists out there, they want choice. I have a lot of libertarian friends trying to talk about this compassionate capitalism that they're trying to ingest. But I've never seen a situation where capitalism doesn't turn into crony capitalism, which would lead to fascism. At the end of the day, we need a mixed economy. We need to understand what the worst things about each ism out there. We have to think less isms, more human, and melt together something that works for all of us.
Couldn't agree more, my man. And I think it's the true diversity of ideas, no matter your color, your gender, your socioeconomic status, what your job is what we need. I do think we need to come together as human beings. We don't necessarily have to label it. If you're voting for Trump and you got to make America great hat on, okay, I don't have a problem with that. If you're wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, I don't have a problem with that. I'm pretty sure that we could all still go out and get a pizza together and enjoy ourselves over a delicious brewski, and let's start there as human beings. So what do you want to leave my audience with? Obviously, you have a multitude of shows out there. The Convo Couch, AM Wake Up. You're on tour right now. You're actually boots on the ground in election integrity, unlike so many others. What do you want to leave the audience with?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, despite all those shows and uh, being on the ground and getting to go. I'm going to Brazil soon to go watch their election stuff. It's still always an honor and a pleasure to come on your show. And I really do mean that, Jason. Today, Richard Grove was on the morning show, and he mentioned, I've seen you on Bermas. You opened up a lot of doors, not just with a lot of the information and the work you do. Some stuff I can't say because we are on YouTube, so I'm going to shut my mouth. But I think it's so important because you've said this before. You're not a MAGA person, you're not a patriot or whatnot. But however, a lot of people would always say, "Oh, Jason Bermas, he's more alt-right," or whatever they would want to call you. But you do have a lot of different eyes and people, truthers or whatever you want to call them, that I never got a chance to talk to. They weren't in my audience. We built our audience. We came from the Bernie Sanders movement. So you opening the door really opened up my mind to continue to do what I'm doing today, and that's to talk to people who think differently than you. Because I always say this, at the end of the day, it's the Jason Bermas theory. What it's all about, right? It's chicken wings and beer. Now, I'm a vegan now. I don't eat chicken wings anymore. But that human element of going out and watching a game, laughing, toasting, whatnot, that's what we need to do more than ever. And when you said that to me a long time ago, I stopped stressing out about what the solution is to get us out of this crazy oligarchic transhumanistic situation we're in, right? I mean, it's a time of acceleration. It seems like they want to put the digital shackles on us. They want to try to shoot us up. I don't want to. Sorry, my bad. They want to
shoot us up with hate and lies. That's what they want to do.
There you go. With disinformation. My God, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, look, we got to censor ourselves. Look what we're doing. This is crazy. However, I don't stress out about it. I appreciate the human element of my life. I'm here with my mom right now. I'm going to go to the hospital right now. She just had a successful surgery. So I'm going to go check up on her and stuff like that. But yeah, go out with your friends, have some chicken wings, have some beers. Remember what it's like to be a human. Get yourself away from all the BS out there and just love your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, and embrace that more than anything. That's what I want to leave with your audience, because that's what you leave with me. And I mention it all the time. It's about chicken wings and beer.
I agree, man. It's the human element. There is no greater truth than love for your fellow man. And as dark and horrifying of a situation we're truly in this new Great Reset agenda world, because that's what they're calling it. It's really repackaged collectivism, globalism, New World Order, whatever you call it. They're saying we're going to take the haves and the have-nots and we're going to equalize them. They're not going to take it away from the have-everythings. There's going to be somebody who has everything, centralized control at the top, and I think that's something that we both recognize. It's been a hot second since we've seen each other personally, so I'm hoping maybe before year's end somewhere we do get together, we have ourselves a beer, and we talk like human beings beyond politics, and I think that is so important, because I'm telling you right now, folks, you have so much more in common with your neighbor, even if you're apolitical or a constitutionalist like me, with a MAGA person or a Marxist. Whether you realize it or not, that doesn't mean the ideologies have to come together, but as human beings, we must come together. So thank you so much, Pasta. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jason. It's always a pleasure. You got to come on the Convo couch soon, brother.
All right.
And the morning show. We need you in the morning. You're better than the caffeine there. It's JB coming on.
We'll do it soon. Just hit me up in the DMs. All right, brother?
You got it, brother. Thank you so much.
There he is, Pasta Jardula of the Convo Couch. He does a great job. And again, we don't have to agree on everything politically, but we do agree that we need free and fair elections, and that we also have to hold our representatives accountable. And I know a lot of people have a problem with that. There's a lot of anarchists out there. There are a lot of people that don't think that we can change the system. I'm highly skeptical, because we do live in a national security state in many ways, with an executive within the executive controlling things through their continuity of government program, through their signature reduction program, through the fusion centers, through the Department of Homeland Security, and much more. So if you want to learn about a lot of that stuff, I'd encourage you to check out all of my documentary films. They are free. Loose Change Final Cut and Fabled Enemies are my 9/11 films. The 21st anniversary just passed us by. I did a full watch along on that anniversary with Fabled Enemies. And then my bigger picture films, Shade the Motion Picture and Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined. You want to support this broadcast, please consider buying me a coffee. $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me. Not sure. Thank you so much. It says, helping to uncover the evil in the world takes true courage. You don't just focus on current events. You are also helping people to foresee what's coming, which will save people from making mistakes. Great work on exposing certain individuals as well, catching snakes before they slither away. Many thanks, brother. Appreciate it. I appreciate you. Appreciate your work with worth over 10 times to me. Keep it up. No, thank you for supporting the broadcast. So that's one way to support the broadcast. Another great way is to check me out over at Rockfin. I give everything away for free. Okay? If you hit that subscribe button up there, you got to do it on a desktop. It's $9.99 a month or $99.99 for the year. And then you get everybody else's premium content, including Pastas, including Steve from Slow News Day, Max Blumenthal, Frank's Analysis, Whitney Webb, The Last American Vagabond. In fact, there's a premium out there with myself and Ryan Christian that I think is well worth the watch. So it's like a Netflix for creators. If not, at least go follow me over there and check out interviews you won't see anywhere else, such as that Patrick Byrne interview that we talked about. Thumbs it up, subscribe, and share. Remember, we're also on Rumble, and I want to thank the good people at Rumble for supporting this broadcast. And as I've been announcing, this Friday, get ready. We've got a new show. I'm tossing around ideas. I got to build myself a virtual set over at Red Voice Media. That's right, Red Voice Media is going to be carrying Jason Bermas once a week in an exclusive video you're not going to want to miss. So guys, once again, to me, it's not about left or right. It is always, always, always about right and wrong. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the flip side.